working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Hello and welcome to ASEAN in Focus. I'm Judith Demera, delivering to you the latest news in and around the ASEAN region on today's headlines. The number of Filipinos infected with the coronavirus disease 2019 or COVID-19 on a quarantine cruise ship in Japan has climbed to 35. The Department of Foreign Affairs or DFA reported on Tuesday. Singapore unveiled $4.6 billion in financial packages on Tuesday to deal with the impact of the deadly coronavirus outbreak, which has battered the city-state's economy and sparked fears of a recession. And Vietnam's inaugural Formula One Grand Prix will take place in Hanoi in April as planned. Organizers told AFP on Tuesday, avoiding the fate of the Chinese Grand Prix, which was postponed over the deadly coronavirus outbreak. The number of Filipinos infected with the coronavirus disease 2019 or COVID-19 on a quarantine cruise ship in Japan has climbed to 35. The Department of Foreign Affairs or DFA reported on Tuesday. Of the total number, 8 are newly confirmed, all of whom are crew members of the MV Diamond Princess, which is currently docked off the Yokohama port in Japan. The Filipinos who tested positive for COVID-19 were immediately transferred to Japanese hospitals and are now undergoing treatment. And I quote, "The embassy constantly communicates with all patients currently confined in Japanese hospitals to ensure their well-being and to provide assistance," the DFA said. There are still at least 503 remaining Filipinos inside the vessel, minus those who contracted the disease. Currently, the Philippines is awaiting an announcement from the Japanese government about the ship's disembarkation procedures. Deputy Chief of Mission Robespierre Bolivar of the embassy said the Japanese government is scheduled to announce disembarkation protocols, so their plans will take these into account. On Monday, some American citizens on the quarantine ship had already been evacuated from Tokyo on flights to the United States. Before overseas Filipino workers or OFWs are allowed to travel back to Hong Kong and Macau for work, they will first be required to prepare a written declaration stating that they are aware of the risk for contacting the coronavirus disease or COVID-19, Malacanang said on Tuesday. Presidential spokesperson Salvador Panelo confirmed that the government has lifted the temporary travel ban imposed on OFWs returning for work in Hong Kong and Macau upon recommendation of the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Disease. He said the task force recommended the lifting of the ban following several requests made by OFWs concerned that they may lose their jobs if they fail to resume work after their vacation leave. He assured that despite their insistence to return to their respective workplaces, the government will still provide them with the necessary assistance. He also explained that the ban was only imposed because President Rodrigo Duterte was concerned about their safety. On the other hand, OFWs who wish to be repatriated will also be given assistance by the government and undergo the prescribed 14-day quarantine, he said. Despite lifting the ban on Hong Kong and Macau, Panelo said the ban on mainland China, the epicenter of the COVID-19 outbreak, remains. Currently, over 74,000 people are confirmed to have had the disease, while more than 2,000 people have died. In the Philippines, there are 3 confirmed COVID-19 cases and over 400 persons under investigation. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has warned against a global overreaction to the new coronavirus epidemic following panic buying, event cancellations, and concerns about cruise ship travel, as China's official death toll jumped to 2,000 on Wednesday. More than 74,000 people have now been infected in China. and hundreds more abroad. Although the WHO stressed the disease has infected a tiny proportion of people outside its epicenter and the mortality rate remains relatively low. The outbreak is threatening to put a dent in the global economy. With China paralyzed by vast quarantine measures and major firms such as iPhone maker Apple and mining giant BHP warning it could damage bottom lines. Trade fairs, sports competitions, and cultural events have been disrupted, while several countries have banned travelers from China and major airlines have suspended flights. The cruise ship industry has come into focus as hundreds of people became infected aboard a vessel off Japan. One passenger tested positive after disembarking another liner in Cambodia. The WHO, which has previously said travel restrictions were unnecessary, rejected the suggestion that all cruises should be halted.
Measures should be taken proportional to the situation, based on public health, science, and evidence. And blanket measures may not help. So that's what we're trying to say.
This is a very serious outbreak, and it has the potential to grow. But we need to balance that in terms of the number of people infected. Outside Hubei, this epidemic is affecting a very tiny proportion of people. So if we're going to disrupt every cruise ship in the world on the off chance that there might be some potential contact with some potential pathogen, then where do we stop? We shut down the buses around the world. And what happens when other countries are affected? Do we take the same measures in that case? So we need to be extremely measured in what we do.
More than 450 people have tested positive for the virus aboard the quarantine Diamond Prince cruise ship of Yokohama in Japan. On Monday, the U.S. repatriated more than 300 Americans who now face another 14 days under quarantine. Attention was also turning to the Westerdam, a cruise ship in Cambodia, where many of the 2,200 people aboard passengers were allowed to disembark after all initially receiving a clean bill of health. They were met by Cambodia's premier, taken on a bus tour of the country's capital and allowed to fly around the world. But an 83-year-old American woman was later diagnosed with the virus after arriving in Malaysia. The World Health Organization said the new novel coronavirus only causes mild disease for 80% of infected patients. WHO's Dr. Tedros Adhanom said trends can change as new populations are affected. It is too early to tell if this reported decline will continue. Take a look.
The data also appear to show a decline in new cases. This trend must be interpreted very cautiously. Trends can change as new populations are affected. It's too early to tell if this reported decline will continue. Every scenario is still on the table. It also appears that COVID-19 is not as deadly as other coronaviruses, including SARS and MERS. More than 80% of patients have mild disease and will recover. In about 14% of cases, the virus causes severe disease, including pneumonia and shortness of breath. And about 5% of patients have critical disease, including respiratory failure, septic shock, and multi-organ failure. In 2% of reported cases, the virus is fatal, and the risk of death increases the older you are. We see relatively few cases among children. More research is needed to understand why. This new data addresses some of the gaps in our understanding, but others remain. The international team of experts now on the ground in China is working with Chinese counterparts to better understand those gaps and improve our understanding of the outbreak.
Cambodia's strongman premier defended on Tuesday his decision to allow a U.S. cruise ship to dock despite at least one passenger later being diagnosed with the deadly coronavirus. while authorities scrambled to track down hundreds that came in contact with her. The Western Dam was turned away by several Asian ports before Cambodia agreed last week to allow its more than 2,000 passengers and crew to disembark. But jubilation dimmed over the weekend when an 83-year-old American woman was stopped at a Malaysian airport and diagnosed with the virus that originated from China and has now killed over 2,000 people. By the time she was diagnosed, scores of fellow passengers had moved through different countries, including Singapore and Thailand. 4 are currently being monitored in Bangkok. Cambodia's Prime Minister Hun Sen remained defiant Tuesday. And I quote, "Some people say it brings the virus to Cambodia, but Cambodia has not had the disease among its people," he said in a speech. Cruise operator Holland America said tests for 406 passengers now at a Phnom Penh hotel were negative, and they could continue their journeys home. For those who've made it to the United States, local health departments working with the U.S. Centers for Disease Control are following up with passengers who might have had contact with the infected American, it added. 300 passengers in Phnom Penh would fly to Dubai, Hun Sen said, while 100 others would take a chartered flight to Japan. Authorities are also arranging another flight for passengers remaining in Sihanoukville, the southern coast where the Western Dam is docked. Though Hun Sen did not say where that was headed, as Cambodia's strongman premier defends his decision to allow a U.S. cruise ship to dock despite at least one passenger later being diagnosed with the deadly coronavirus. Some residents of Sihanoukville are getting alarmed, while others remain unconcerned.
When visiting the Philippines, Manila or Quezon City is a popular destination. But oftentimes the hustle and bustle of the city can be more stressful on your vacation. So when you feel the need to reconnect to nature or relax again, there's a beautiful oasis just outside of the city called the Garden at Ciudad de Victoria. Some of the species that you can see here include hydrangea, snapdragon, and stargazers. They're truly beautiful. The gardens at Ciudad de Victoria are so peaceful, tranquil, and beautiful that it's become a haven for young couples and a very popular venue for engagement photos. The next time you want an escape from the big city, the garden at Ciudad de Victoria is a wonderful place to visit.
Welcome back. Singapore unveiled 4.6 billion US dollars in financial packages on Tuesday to deal with the impact of the deadly coronavirus outbreak, which has battered the city-state's economy and sparked fears of a recession. The financial hub has reported 77 cases of the virus, one of the highest figures outside mainland China, where the pathogen has killed hundreds and infected tens of thousands. Tourism and trade are both expected to be hard hit by the virus in Singapore, an open economy with close links to China that is badly affected during any global shock. Finance Minister Heng Swee-keat announced financial packages worth a total of 6.4 billion Singapore dollar as part of the annual budget and warned that the full impact of the outbreak is yet to be felt. The duration and severity of this outbreak and the impact on the global economy are still unclear, he said. 5.6 billion Singapore dollars was earmarked to help companies and families ride out the looming slowdown, with a large chunk set to go to firms in the most affected sectors, including aviation, tourism, and retail. There was also money to help families, which will come in the form of cash payouts and grocery vouchers for the needy. An additional 800 million Singapore dollars was set aside to support virus-fighting efforts, with the most going to Health Ministry. The packages would result in an overall budget deficit of 10.9 billion Singapore dollars. Heng said, but added that the government had enough surpluses to fund it. Authorities had rolled out a financial package totaling 230 million Singapore dollars during the severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS, outbreak in 2002 to 2003. The Trade Ministry said Monday that growth this year could be between negative 0.5 and 1.5%, with analysts saying this means there is a higher risk of a recession. Singapore has banned travelers from mainland China, the city's biggest source of tourists. Meanwhile, United Kingdom Prime Minister's trade envoy to the Philippines, Richard Graham, has proposed to British Prime Minister Boris Johnson to hold an investment forum between the UK and the 10 member states of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN. Graham told reporters Tuesday that the proposed UK-ASEAN Investment Forum aims to gather heads of states of the Southeast Asian bloc and the British Prime Minister. The inaugural UK-Africa Investment Summit in London in January invited state leaders from Africa as well as businessmen. The summit, hosted by the UK, aims to pursue the British government's target to be the largest investor in Africa. The event also had an exhibition space for African and British entrepreneurs to showcase their products and services in both markets. The trade envoy said the investment forum with the ASEAN can also showcase the creative industry, along with the traditional goods and services that economic bloc can offer to the British market. Graham added to have an ASEAN investment forum whether there's an opportunity for films, for fashion, for writing, a lot of things in cultural side, as well as the more traditional exports. He thinks that would be a good opportunity for the Philippines. He said the weaving and textile industries in the Philippines have big opportunities in the UK. Graham further said the British government is promoting strengthening of trade and investment ties with different countries and regions as it pursues independent trade arrangements around the globe as the UK finally leaves the European Union at the end of the year. Anxieties over the impact of the coronavirus disease 2019 or COVID-19 on the economy continue to hit the financial market, resulting in the sideways close of both the equities index and the peso Tuesday. The Philippine Stock Exchange Index, or the PSEI, shed 0.05% or 3.96 points to 7,322.89 points, which BPI research said mirrored the performance of its counterparts in the region. BPI research also cited reports about Apple not going to meet its revenues given the impact of COVID-19 on the supplies from China. There was some risk of sentiment in the local equities, with the all-share up by 0.05%. It was also a mix among the sectors, with services rising by 1.31% and was trailed by the mining and oil with 0.67% and property with 0.03%. Financials fell 0.99%, industrial with 0.37%, and holding firms with 0.01%. Volume totaled to 503.9 million shares, amounting to 5.33 billion pesos. Decliners surpassed the gainers at 101 to 86, while 45 shares were unchanged. The local currency ended at 50.645 from its 50.57 close on Monday. It opened the day sideways at 50.63 and traded between 50.65 and 50.57, resulting in an average of 50.613. Volume totaled to $933.9 million, lower than the $971.5 million a day ago. The currency pair is seen to trade between 50.50 and 50.80 on Wednesday. Vietnam's inaugural Formula One Grand Prix will take place in Hanoi in April as planned, organizers told AFP on Tuesday, avoiding the fate of the Chinese Grand Prix, which was postponed over the deadly coronavirus outbreak. The virus, which has killed more than 2,000 people in China, has trashed Asia's sporting calendar, forcing the postponement of top events, including the Hong Kong Sevens rugby. But Vietnamese authorities said the country's inaugural F1 race would go ahead as scheduled on April 5. Lee Ngoc Chi, the CEO of Vietnam Grand Prix, told media. That flies in the face of mounting fears over the spread of the virus from neighboring China and the risk of transmission among the crowds expected to make the journey to the Vietnamese capital. Deputy Director of Hanoi's Tourism Department, Tran Trung Yu, said the time for the F1 race will not be postponed or delayed. Although this is a sports event, it has a very huge impact on Vietnam and Hanoi's tourism, he said, adding all measures will be taken on to ensure safety. AFP reporters saw workers building stands at the racetrack as construction continued this week. That is the latest news in the Southeast Asian nations. Stay updated about the ASEAN region. I'm Judith Timera, and I'm 1 with 25.